Sahir Galt here, and I've recently been spending a lot of time with EastWest's new reverb, Spaces 2. So I thought I'd walk you through what I like about it. They've taken the concept of convolution reverb and done something with it that I think is pretty clever. Now, if you're not familiar, the main allure of a convolution reverb is that it captures the reverberant characteristics of actual places, from concert halls to courtyards to caves. Now, how this works is interesting in and of itself, but will also help us understand what's special about Spaces 2. So let's briefly talk theory. A convolution reverb starts with an impulse, the sound of a starting pistol firing, or an electric spark, or a sine wave sweeping through a range of frequencies. Play this in the space to be captured, causing it to reverberate. And the way the space reverberates after the impulse is called the response. And this is recorded. The convolution reverb will then take that impulse response and use it as a kind of signal factor, multiplying it against whatever dry signal you send through it. The effect is that it models the way a sound would decay in the space where the impulse was taken, specifically where it played where the impulse was fired, and mic'd where the response was recorded. Now, many of the popular convolution reverbs available contain impulse responses from a few places in any given space. For using an impulse response of a concert hall, for example, you might have the response recorded up close at the conductor's stand, as well as somewhere further back in the rows of seating, in effect, giving you the ability to change the listening position. Now, this is where EastWest has taken things further. In addition to giving you various listening positions in a given space, they varied where the impulse was fired from and in what direction. Of course, not randomly. They've chosen based on where instruments would be seated on the stage. So violins on the left side of the stage, cello on the right. They've also modeled the direction the instruments would be pointed. Sound holes of violins point up, and so that's the direction the impulse was fired from the violin seating position. French horns face backward, and so for those IRs, the impulse was fired at the back wall. And while the concept is interesting, the result is really impressive. There's this satisfying sense of coherence when using the reverb that corresponds to the instrument for which it was intended. And while you don't have to use the IRs prescriptively, you may find the simplification of which IR to use on what instrument really appealing. Okay, so now that you get the idea of what's going on under the hood of Spaces 2, let's listen to it. Here I have a recording of my piano. It's been close mic'd, and it's routed to an instance of Spaces 2. And it by default loads this Reynolds Hall. Now, Spaces 2 provides you a good amount of control over the reverb, pre-delay, length of the tail, frequency balance. But for the moment, let's just hear how it sounds right out of the box. Here's my piano dry. It's a good sound, and with reverb engaged, feels more immersive and three-dimensional. That's a pretty subtle use of reverb. Let's try something a little bit more overt. The Carlsbad Cavern responses have these beautiful, long, interesting sounding tails. Let's bring it up a bit. Listen to that beautiful decay. Gorgeous. Now, let me share my favorite impulse response of the bunch, this Hamburg lake forest. Let me remind you of the dry sound. Now engage. This gives us this bit of air and sparkle without sounding overtly wet. Now, in addition to halls, caverns, and forests, they've also captured some fantastic digital devices. There are some selections from a classic Lexicon Reverb that you'll find useful. Let's try this relatively long tail. Let's give you a taste of one of the plates. Let's hear a little bit more of the reverb. Okay, maybe not that much. There's also this curated selection of instrument-specific reverbs. Let's try the large venues for the piano. How about the LA Piano Hall? Remind you of the dry sound. It's a little stark. But now it's lush, larger than life. Let's keep going with these instrument-specific reverbs. Next up, we've got a couple violins. Now, these were recorded in my mix room, so extraordinarily dry. Let's pop open spaces, and again, we're greeted with the default Reynolds Hall, which has some options for violin. Let's try the Socal Orchestra Hall, whose instrument-specific reverbs are mono to stereo, meaning our violins are going to get summed to mono, then sent to a stereo reverb. Now, some of the halls do this in true stereo. Look at those in a sec. Here's the dry sound again. And with the reverb. I find that one extraordinarily transparent. My favorite of the halls, just the Davies Hall. And we'll use its true stereo violins and cello response. Love how the tail cascades like that. Try the New York String Hall. And they have a few selections for what they call soundstage for thin orchestra. We have 2 violins, a very thin orchestra indeed. Let's try the Culver scoring stage. All right, a little extra dimension and fullness, but doesn't wash it out. Very useful. All right, let's shift gears a little bit and see how a snare drum takes some of these reverbs. Make a nice long loop so we can hear the tails. There's actually this AMS gated reverb that they've captured, which makes it quick and easy to get a retro sound out of your drums. Dry. 80s. One more time. I've also captured some really excellent sounding drum rooms. I tend to like the smaller rooms. Dry sound, by comparison, sounds really flat. The reverb on it opens up the top end and makes it sound less choked. Now, if you want the reverb to draw attention to itself, try the big rooms. And a to really put the instrument-specific reverbs to the test, I've cooked up an arrangement with piano, violas, cello, and a makeshift choir. Just give you a sense of the thing dry. Right, you get the idea. Let's first unmute this reverb bus they're all sending to. We're going to base this around the Reynolds Hall, and you'll find that it actually doesn't have a true stereo, instrument-specific piano reverb, but that's fine. You can find it and a whole host of other useful reverbs under the mono to stereo heading. And to start with, let's see what that sounds like. Great. And, let's actually give this piano a slightly more orchestral panning, off to the side the way it would be. Dry. Engaged. Let's get those violas involved. Close, intimate sounding. There's nothing wrong with using no reverb. Let's see if we can place the violas in the same hall as the piano, using the violin and viola impulse response. Beautiful. Dry. Wet. I love the rich, cinematic quality we're getting, but I feel a little too distant. So let's pull in the amount of reverb. Let's try that. There we go. Get the sense of the space without losing too much immediacy. Now these violas were close mic'd, so let's use the filters to pull out just a little bit of the low end. Clean up some of that bulk. Yeah, that's a little bit more crisp. Let's add in the cello. Here's what we're working with dry. Add its reverb to the mix. We'll use the violins and cello. Now we're getting somewhere. Just one more part to add, the makeshift choir. Which, if you can't tell, is just my voice layered a few times. And it's surprising how transformative using the choir reverb is. Really puts you in the hall. Having just heard that formidable tale, I'm reminded that I haven't shown you the decay time control yet. I'll just slide it back. The tail gets shorter. Sounds a bit more like a scoring stage. Can go even further, all the way to a very tight room. Let's give most of its length back. Great. Now let's put them all together and see what we have, and jump in where the violas begin. Here it is dry. And with reverb. And even though all these instruments were recorded separately, in different rooms, the reverbs brought them together, making them feel alive in the same space. Dry, everything dissociates, and then blends together with the reverb engaged. And finally, I want to share with you the Planetary Manifestations, a digital reverb with a spectacularly long tail, perfect for making soundscapes and pads. Sending virtually anything to it is interesting. Since it's here, Let's try my piano. So I've got the reverb set up pre-fader. I can bring my piano track all the way down to 0, and the reverb will still see signal. So in effect, we're just hearing the reverb tail. I will leave you with the ghostly haze of endless reverb. Special thanks to EastWest. Hope you enjoyed the tour of Spaces 2. That's all for now. I'm Sahir Galt. I'll see you next time.